Very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. How are you doing?
Good to see you. Yeah, very well indeed. You know, they hate you on the Labour side because you actually provide facts and you actually provide data and you actually provide figures that they can't really argue with. So carry on. Tell us what you got for us.
Yeah, well, it looks like we were racist in the 1980s and 1990s, Mike. So we had the mid-2024 population stats last Friday from the ONS. I've been digging into what's really happened since I was born in 1979, really. Yeah. What's been going on in Britain. And what's remarkable is, and this is kind of reading into why Reform are talking about the policies they're talking about, is if we look at the last 3 years, so that's mid-2021 up to mid-2024 across the UK. Now, we had a net inflow in immigration of 2.3 million. And then if you go back to the 1980s, so 1981, let's start there. It took from 1981 to 2007, so that's 26 years, to get net immigration of 2.2 million. So we've had more in the last 3 years than we have in 26 years. And that's kind of why Nigel Farage is talking about the strain on the services of this. We can't continue. So migration was in the tens of thousands in the 80s and 90s. Tony Blair came in and it started going over the 100,000 barrier. Then it continued under David Cameron and Theresa May. And in the last 3 years, Mike, it's just been unprecedented. And that's why I suppose the Reform Party are trying to get a grip on this. So it's not racist to have had those figures in the 1980s, so it's not racist now.
Well, exactly right. And in terms of the way that the migration stats have changed, I mean, what's clear, and we all knew this and we've been saying it for years, is that the increase in acceleration of the numbers of people coming into this country over, the past 5 years has been extraordinary compared to the previous 20.
Indeed, and what's changed, because people talk about this, you just mentioned in the Brexit vote there as well, and this is where it's complete government failure in terms of controlling the border. So what happened after the Brexit vote is we did start seeing immigration coming down from people within the EU. And we've seen in the last few years, though, a massive increase in the number of people coming from non-EU countries. So in the last year, the big 5 countries in terms of where people are coming from into the UK net is India, Nigeria, Pakistan, China and Zimbabwe. And you wouldn't have had those kind of levels of immigration from those countries, you know, in the last 10, 20 years before that. And that has a big impact just on in terms of the kind of the society that we live in and integration. And with the numbers that you have in, Mike, you tend to find as well you get pockets of people setting up their own communities rather than integrating within the country.
Well, right. And when you think about some of the countries they're now coming from, you know, those countries you mentioned were sort of traditional places where people would come from. But now we're talking about places like Eritrea, Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, you know, those kind of sub-Saharan African countries where, you know, before they never came. And there's no explanation in the stats, is there, for why they're coming. But what we can say, I would say with relative surety, is they're not coming because of climate change. They're not coming because of wars. They're coming because they want to come, because they fancy a better life.
Yeah, and you can't argue with people having a better life. But ultimately, Mike, you know, we're living without our means at the moment. We're borrowing money. You know, we talked recently about we borrowed huge amounts of money in August, huge amounts of money in June. And the total asylum accommodation, which is focused on that, recently cost us 4.7 billion. And we recently spoke about the fact that, you know, to pay that bill, 600,000, you know, people working in Britain had to get up every tax, the income tax and national insurance to fund that. So I think in terms of migration, people always said, oh, it's a net benefit to the country, but that's kind of coming, the chicken's coming home to roost on that, Mike, in that the people who are coming over, and a lot of these are a drain on the state. And that's ultimately what these figures mean. And the more important thing as well, Mike, what does this mean, these levels of migration for people living here? So in 1998, the average house price was 60,000 across England and Wales. By 2004, that had gone up to 280,000. So 367,000 increase. Average wages over the period went from about 17.5 to 37.5. So they've almost doubled there, just over double there, Mike. So, but when house prices have gone up so much because of this net migration, people can't get in the housing now. Your average price to the average wage was 3.5 times back in 1998. It's now 7.5 times. So it's no wonder you know, young people in this country can't get on the housing ladder, can't start a family, and it's devastating.
But that's the thing. There's also an admission today by the government, which they previously have never admitted, that basically families are allowed to come into this country too easily and too quickly, because according to the front page of the Times today, automatic rights for refugees are going to be scrapped. Keir Starmer says he's going to end the golden ticket for asylum seekers by requiring refugees to earn their right to bring their families to Britain and scrapping automatic settlement, which tells you that up until now, people had the right to bring their families to Britain. We saw a story just the other day of the guy who's the nephew of the commander in the Taliban, who claims that he didn't want to be a jihadi, so he had to come to Britain to save himself from being put on the front line of whatever it was the Taliban wanted him to do. But he's now been told by a court in this country that he can bring 7 members of his family, including his parents, his sister, and a nephew and a niece. And none of them can speak English, and the judge even acknowledged that actually it's going to cost the country quite a lot of money to keep these people, because they won't be working. There'll be a drain on the state, there'll be a drain on the welfare system, and that's just one example of 8 people who have come to this country because they don't like the Taliban, supposedly.
Yeah, and that's why the figures, Mike, we had 624,000 net in 22, 906,000 in 2023, and nearly 740,000 in 2024. And it's partly to what you said. Somebody comes over and then they start bringing over loads more of their family. I think one of the things is started under the Conservative government. We are seeing in net migration figures starting to come down from those really high levels, because they're looking at these bogus student visas and looking at this right for family to come over. But, you know, what's the purpose of migration, Mike? Really, for the British population, the purpose of migration is for people to come over, contribute to society, pay tax. The example you give is not going to be doing that. And what does it mean? More borrowing or increased taxes. And that's not a really good overall.
No, it really isn't. Jamie, good to see you. Thank you very much indeed. Jamie Jenkins, independent statistician, giving us the lowdown on why immigration has become such a massive problem over the course of the best part of the last 5 years. In just 3 years, he says, net migration was more than the entire 27-year period before that, from 1981 to 2007.